with you, I think that's what the issue is. There's an educational gap. Technology is outpaced education. You're going to see some equipment today, and it's so fantastic, some of the things that you can do with it. But the whole thing with ultrasound is concept, since the beginning I've been reading the literature, it talks about operator dependency. If you get a CT scan, the spleen is always in the same place, whether you're 400 pounds or 150 pounds. But with ultrasound, it depends on you on how to get some of these images. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is get you guys up to speed with some ultrasound. I want to introduce Dave Hartnett. He's one of our fourth-year honor students. He's going to just give a brief presentation on some terminology. What we've done here at Ohio State is we've written a couple of papers. One of them called the IM technique and how to approach a focused ultrasound. What we're talking about today is a focused ultrasound rather than comprehensive. We're going to talk about some of the three colors that we will see today, how to interpret the images. So just welcome Dave Hartnett.
Thanks. Yeah, so I know that we have a very, very wide variety of experience here in the room today. So let me pull this up here. So what I want to do for the next 20 minutes or so is just kind of bring everyone up to the same page, so that we're using the universal language throughout the day today in order to describe what we're doing and describe how we're going to learn. So first, I'm going to go over just a couple of basic physics principles so that we all know what we're talking about with the ultrasound. We're going to talk about the various colors that we see on the screen with ultrasound, the different sides of the image, the probe motions that we use to obtain those images, and just some basic knowledge, so how we can improve our images and really see what we're trying to see. So the basic physics of ultrasound. Electricity comes into the probe. Piezoelectric crystal inside of the probe converts it into an ultrasound wave, which goes into the tissue and comes back to the probe and is converted back into electrical information, which is then displayed on the screen. Pretty simple. But the question is, what happens to the sound waves when they're in the tissue? Because that's what changes the images that we see on the screen. So the ultrasound waves can be absorbed or attenuated. They can be reflected back when there's a difference in the tissue and that tissue interfaces. They can be refracted between different tissues, and the waves can be scattered as well. So just a brief overview of a sound wave. The sound wave propagates in a direction. We call that wave propagation. And over a certain distance, it's going to attenuate, meaning that the amplitude, the strength of the signal gets smaller, weaker, over a specific distance. So it's very important for what we're doing. So what is the speed of sound? Anyone?
740. Depends on the pressure.
It depends on the altitude, sure, because it depends on the medium. So the speed of sound in a vacuum, sound can't travel in a vacuum. Sound has to travel through a medium. So the speed of sound in air, which is kind of the thing that you first think of, 330 meters per second. I'll remember that from basic physics. But then in different tissues, sound travels at a different velocity. So fat is traveling a little slower, bone is traveling pretty fast. We average soft tissues in general, call it 1540 meters per second. But this is important because if you think about wave or laser beam, as you travel through different things, different tissues, your sound wave velocity is going to change. And so that's going to cause refraction when you go between different tissues. So if you're coming down and the speed of the propagation velocity in the second tissue is faster, your sound wave is going to bend. And then as it comes back, as it's reflected back, it's going to bend again. With the ultrasound machine, you can't tell what the wave did when it was out there. You can only tell when it comes back. So that's going to map it out as having been a straight thing. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So that's one thing the wave can do. It can do refract. Attenuation. So like I said, this is the wave getting weaker over time. Notice that water, its attenuation coefficient is 0. In air, it's 12. All the other tissues are kind of in between. So this is a very important concept that different tissues have these different attenuation velocities. So that's going to affect what we see on the screen. And I want to point out, the units down here for attenuation, decibels per centimeter per megahertz. So the amount of attenuation you have changes for the frequency of your probe. And each probe has a specific frequency range that we can use. And so if we have a higher frequency probe, it's going to attenuate faster. So you're not going to be able to see as deep into the tissue because your ultrasound wave is going to get We use a higher frequency probe for superficial structures and a lower frequency probe for deeper structures. Higher frequency gives us better resolution. Lower frequency gives us better penetration. So reflection, this is kind of the meat of ultrasound because this is what comes back to the probe and what we see. The sound waves go down and tissue interfaces and grab tissues, it's reflected back to the probe. And if you remember, angle in, angle out, basic trigonometry principle or geometry principle, if you're at 90 degrees to the tissue interface, all of that sound, all of that energy is going to be reflected back. We call that a specular reflector. So it's going to make the image really bright and you're really going to see everything that you're seeing. If you're at a different angle, then some of that is going to be reflected in a different direction. And you're not going to see as bright of an image because you're going to have a weaker signal coming back to the probe. And the last thing that the sound waves can do when they're in the tissue is scatter. So if you hit a smooth, uniform surface, you're going to have all of that sound wave reflected back. If you hit a non-uniform surface, it's going to be scattered. And the sound waves are going to hit different things, they'll be different angles, and they'll be scattered around. So how do we take those principles of what the sound can do and explain the colors that we see on the screen? So the first color, anechoic, black images. So this is going to mean that there's no echoes coming back. The sound wave travels straight through and is not reflected back. So remember the attenuation coefficient of water and blood, very low. Fluids are where we see black. But there's also artifacts in ultrasound. This is a very important part, especially in lung ultrasound, where we're trying to see the artifacts. And so the other thing that can be black is artifacts. So here's an example. This is the IVC. We're going down, it's gray, it's gray, it's gray, and then there's black. So this is fluid within the IVC that we're seeing. And it's anechoic. The ultrasound waves are going straight through, not being reflected back until they get to the back wall of the IVC. And here's an example of an artifact. So this is a port, and the ultrasound waves come down, and the port reflects all of the ultrasound waves back. So we have a shadow behind the port. There's really tissue back here, but you're not seeing it because you're seeing a shadow, and the ultrasound waves are not able to get there. The next color is a simple gray. Your hypoechoic. So some echoes are coming back, but not all hypoechoic. And so all the soft tissues, solid organs, they're all going to have various degrees of hypoechogenicity and send back a certain signal. And if you remember again, the attenuation coefficient is different for all of these tissues. They're all going to have a different appearance to them. So this is kind of a really classic view that we're going to come back to a couple times. So this is in the right upper quadrant. We see the liver here, and then we see the right kidney and the psoas muscle. So we have liver, kidney, and psoas muscle. They all have different appearances. They're all soft tissues. They're all hypoechoic in different ways. And then you can also have gray artifacts. So here we can see what we call a reflection artifact. Above the diaphragm, we're seeing a reflection of the liver because the diaphragm is reflecting the ultrasound beam off the diaphragm. It travels and it comes back to the probe. But again, the probe doesn't know where the ultrasound beam traveled. So it's plotting everything that's reflecting and forming a mirror behind the diaphragm. The last color, white, bright hyperechoic. So white things, they're going to reflect back a lot of the echo. All the ultrasound wave reflects back. A couple examples here, bone, periosteum, pericardium, things that are going to provide very strong reflections. And also air is going to appear white. So here's an example with bone. You can see the periosteum of the bone is reflecting back all of the signal. But again, you can have artifacts. All of these colors can also be artifacts. And so we're seeing a white artifact here on the screen. And this is called a reverberation artifact that's occurring because nothing is getting beyond here. It's reflecting back up and coming from this. It's coming down, reflecting. And so it's plotting these artifacts on the other side of it. Here's an example of air. So this is another white line, and these are the rib particles here. And you're seeing just the interface between the tissue and the air because the attenuation coefficient of air is very high and air is a scattering surface. So what we're seeing is really just the interface between the tissue and the air, and then all of this is artifact. So now that we know the different colors and kind of how we get those colors, let's talk about how we're going to actually obtain the images today. So CT scan, everything's at 90 degrees, everything is the same image. You could get scans in other ways. You can get a chest x-ray the other way, but we have these standards that make it so that you can read in the chest x-ray. You can understand that any CT scan you're looking at can be. So we do the same thing with ultrasound. Even though you can't put the probe on in any way whatsoever, we have a system that makes it so that you can understand the images and the images can communicate themselves. So every probe has a leading edge indicator, a dot or a light or a notch, something on it that indicates which side is the leading edge. And that's going to correlate with your image on the screen with the leading edge indicator. So we call this side of the screen the leading edge, and the receding edge is our other side. Then near the probe is the near field, and far away from the probe is the far field. So if we look at this on an actual image, we have the near field near the probe, the far field away from it, the leading edge, and the receding edge. So for this particular image, the probe is positioned with the leading edge on the patient's right, and that's kind of our standard. The leading edge to the patient's right or towards the head. So on the leading edge, we have the patient's right. On the receding edge, we have the patient's left. This is a subxiphoid view of the aorta here, so we can see the near field. This is going to be anterior and posterior. So if you think about it, this is the same image you would get, the same orientation if you had a CT scan looking up from the view. The probe motions are difficult to describe. So what we've done is come up with a uniform description that we're going to use throughout the entire day so that you can understand what the doctors are trying to tell you, you can make suggestions to each other. So we're going to go through it as moving in the x-axis, which you will do large motions in order to find whatever anatomy you're looking for. Then we're going to center an object within the screen in order to move in the y-axis. We're going to talk about changing our axis through the long axis and the short axis. So the first thing is finding an object. So we can do this with a sweep or a fan. And a sweep is a large motion where we're moving the x-axis or the short axis of the probe. And we're maintaining a constant angle of inclination and moving the footprint of the probe. So these are great little diagrams to show that. And then a fan is going to be different in that we're keeping the footprint in one place and we're changing the angle of inclination. So how do these show different images? This is a sweep. So we're starting here with the probe in the mid-axillary line and sweeping posterior. And you'll notice that the near field and the far field of the image are both changing. And this person sweeps posteriorly, we can then see the kidney here with the liver. So that's going to be a little bit different from what you're going to see with the fan. So here the probe is already in the posterior axillary line, and as the person fans, notice the kidney is changing a lot. In the near field, we're staying pretty much on the same portion of the liver. So this is coming out and fanning back and forth. And so you're seeing the far field change while the near field stays the same. So this is a great way to interrogate a structure like this. The next thing is centering an object. So here we can either rock or slide. So these are both movements in the long axis of the probe. The slide, similar to when we were sweeping, the angle of inclination is going to stay the same, and we're going to move the footprint. As opposed to the rock, the angle of inclination is going to change, and the footprint is going to stay in one position. So here is an example of sliding. The probe is slid superiorly, and notice the entire image changes. So we go from focusing on the kidney to now we're focusing on the diaphragm. The near field change, the far field change, the orientation of the image stays similar. So this is going to be different from a rock, in which, again, the near field is going to stay pretty constant, and the far field is changing. So you can see how the spine here is fanning back and forth. It's a bad choice of word. It's rocking back and forth, sort of like a ship of rock. And finally, movements around the z-axis. So if we call the center of the probe the z-axis, the line going right through, we can increase the pressure moving down along the z-axis, which would produce a contact artifact of the skin. Because again, the ultrasound beams will not travel through air. So if there's any air within the ultrasound probe in the skin, you're not going to be able to see anything behind it. We can also rotate around the center of the probe. And this is going to change our axis through the object. So everything in the body has a long axis view, a short axis view, and 178 views in between. So our objective is to figure out, what is the exact long axis, what is the short axis, and how can we find those. So here's the same view of the kidney and the liver, and notice as it rotates, we're seeing we're still in the same focus, but the image is changing as we rotate. Last thing I just want to go over real quick is some basic knobology, the study of the knobs. The first thing that for every ultrasound machine, like Dr. Blankenship was saying, surgery needs to find is the power button. So all machines have a power button. They also have a power cord plugged into the wall. The power. So it's important to identify that. It usually has like a power symbol on it, the word power. And then there's a patient button in a different place on every machine. But this is where you enter patient information so you can save your images and things such as that. The next things, the next two, are really the main things we're going to adjust today, the depth and the gain. These are kind of the ways that you can start making your image better. So as for depth, which you can see sometimes is a button, sometimes it's a knob, changing the depth so that you're really focused on what you're trying to find is important. So on any ultrasound image, you have too much depth, and in the far field, you're just wasting space on the screen. If you have the image that you want focused, and you're using the appropriate depth, then most of the screen is being used by the interesting data. The other thing is gain, which again is on some machines with buttons, on some machines with knobs, and this is going to change kind of the whole brightness of the field. Everything on the screen is going to get brighter with more gain, and darker with less gain. It's kind of like the volume of the sound. Also on some machines, there are sliders that can adjust the gain in various levels of the screen. These are a little bit more advanced things. There's a focal zone, which can be adjusted. We'll talk about that in a second. And then there's also specific modes. So there's all sorts of presets in these fancy machines that make it so that your images are better. And using the appropriate mode, such as cardiac mode or abdominal mode or OB mode, make it so that the presets on the machine are focused on what you're trying to look at. They also make it so that you can use different calculations and just make the whole experience much more exciting. And then you can label your images as well, so that the whole image speaks for itself. So like I said, focal zones, so the ultrasound beam is not really a single slice. It's got a little bit of a third dimension to it. And the focal zone is where the focus of that energy is going to be. So you want your navigation of interest to be right at the focal zone or just superficial to it. And a couple more advanced things, you use tissue harmonics, which reduce some of those artifacts, as well as dynamic range multi-beam. These are a little bit more advanced than what we're hoping to cover today. So does anyone have any questions about the basics of ultrasound, the various colors, and probe motions? Okay, thank you.
So we're going to move over to the CSAC, but real quick, what are the three colors of ultrasound? What's black ultrasound? They are fluid or artifact. What's gray on ultrasound? Tissue or artifact. You see a pattern. What's white on ultrasound? Air is white on ultrasound. What color is air on CT and X-ray? Black. And so air is going to be white, bone is going to be white, dead structure is going to be white. Four sides, what's the top of the screen called? Near field, bottom, far field. Vending machines, the dot's going to be on the left side, and that dot or that indicator will be what? Which side? LL, F80. On the right side will not be a dot, that's the CDS. And then if we have a probe, but we're going to move it, if we're in the long axis, what is that called, that motion? Slide. We're going to leave that in the seating edge, and that is the long axis. You move it with L, that's the slide. Keep the angle of incidence 90. If I change the angle of incidence, what's that? Rock. If I have a problem with centering, I either rock or slide to solve it. If something's not centered, I want centered. If I move in this direction at 90 degrees, what do we call that? Sweep. Change the angle of incidence of fan, and we're going to rotate. Just so we can communicate when we're going to do that. Well, a couple of Ohio States, what we're going to do is we're going to, I think we have to walk outside and go over to CSAC right across the street, and we'll go up to the 6th floor. It opens, I think the doors open. You can take some people down through the back way, but I think that most of us, you guys want to get your coats, and we're going to go over there for 2 rounds and come back here for lunch. Back to the afternoon.
movements, tendons, any fluid shows up beautifully. Nerve blocks, things of that nature.
You use like that in a more obese patient, or like what's the difference in like the actual size of the head? What would make you choose one over the other?
Yeah, absolutely. Hop right on, and actually while we're talking, because I want you guys to get. So these beds are not the best.
Later, you're teaching them cardiac.
Shuffle it.
I'm a second year with
I think that'll be okay. I think this is one of the older. Don't worry. So,
we can go over it. How you guys know?
This I don't think I am.
Okay.
Brennan James. Nice to meet you. First year. Let's get
So when you change probes, this is obviously your screen is showing obviously perfectly like presentation. When you change the probes, does that change also?
Yes, it does. So we can show that. I want somebody who has not touched a probe to start touching and playing and spinning around right now while I do some boring lectures. Okay.
It's okay.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Brennan.
Brendan and Denise.
So being pro people. So there's this knob on the side. Feel that? That's corresponding to this edge 3. So notice if you touch right here on the probe, right? You can always check which side your leading edge is. Yep, you got it. So you can always check it. So go ahead. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to do one of the first images in the fast scan, which is the hepatorenal view. So go ahead and just stick it on. Sure, stick it with the leading edge. Sorry, I'll get some from the lecture points. The leading edge towards the patient's like that. Perfect. So get comfortable where you can see. Get comfortable in a position where you can see the screen, as well as be able to.
You just push that red button on the bottom by the wheel and lock it.
Press harder.
Now you need to push. It is. It's hard.
Because you want the surface to be flat against.
Slide around. So.
That's called longitude.
Cool. So, by all means, play around and scan while I'm talking. I want to make sure that people are getting time to scan in addition to not just listening to me talk. So you start to get a feel, feel for the probe, feel for the anatomy. And Denise can also help us as we're talking.
So that's what's really big. You just throw it on his ear and
Gotcha. Okay. So once I post it, it's
So as you start to, as you
Hi. Nice to meet you. Yes, I'm a photographer, yes. Very nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Just having an interview. On the right side of the screen. Here's the AC joint. It's not a perfect image because I'm a little bit off of 90 degrees. So you're not seeing this perfect surface with the white surface. But as far as the AC joint is a little bit of a V between
So this is a big thing is air, when the ultrasound hits air, it doesn't go through it at all. So you don't actually really ever see lung tissue unless there's something wrong with it. So in our healthy patient, we shouldn't see that. We kind of starry night sky. It's kind of the appearance they typically describe as the liver. So then, you know what this is? This little white thing kind of flipping up like this. Yeah, so this is a diaphragm coming into the altar. So you're actually a little bit higher, all the way pushing. So, and then we kind of see some kind of like light, you can't see anything behind it. This is where your head is. So I'm going to reposition it a little bit. What we want to find is the
Hanging around.
Normally you want to put it like tight and then go all the way and a cold structure support.
So you want to visualize everything you visualize. You start at the top of the kidney, sweep down the side. You can see that there's no fluid the whole way through. Like I said, in this game, right kidney, liver, horse's pouch, diaphragm here. Take a deep breath. Down. That's called the current side. So you already tried one. Do you want to do one view each and then rotate, or do you want to do all 4 views? Then? 4? All right. So you stay on the side of the patient for all 4 views. It's a little. This is a challenging view, especially because you have to reach over. Where's your leading edge? I think it's down. Yep, it was. Yeah, so you had a patient facing down, so the image is back. So this is the leading edge. Here, you can see it kind of moving to the top. So you want that turned towards your head, so the image is upside down. You did a good job, you just had it. Is this the left kidney?
I think it might be.
Rock,
Just come back. If you're not sure, you can always try longitudinal.
So what you're going to do is start sweeping towards the right. Yep. Just make sure you follow them for the came up on it.
Okay.
So this one.
You have the right idea. So
Okay.
just follow her rib. So what are the structure pieces? So that's
I like watched this. Dang it.
So, what do you think this is?
So you typically do golf class.
So what is that? So this is pretty big. That's what would be the next step. And then
Go in slowly. Flash hands you may not actually get safety in hands. So zoom thing back out a little bit and try to run it in that case.
You have to get the angle just right, and you'll see the you'll see the iris and see the people and shine the light.
It takes longer and your eyes closed.
Our fourth year webmaster tweaking.
a little bit. We have an account in charge of that, but I haven't been keeping up with it. I have a committee that I've been trying to get to do more things. No, it's a little difficult. Not a time.
Remember to do it.
So it still looks left underneath.
Yeah, I mean, but you know
I
you're
know that
oriented.
because of my orientation.
Yeah, you're oriented.
I do not know my orientation.
Yeah.
Okay. Up and down. Okay, that makes
Always,
sense.
just always
That makes
when you
sense.
just gotta always know when you're looking at the leading edge, and also there should be. I'm gonna reach over you.
Pixel with the eye.
I guess there's no pictures of the eye, but you can type it in if you need to, just so when you save the image, you know what you're looking at, and also you can put leading edge towards head or whatever you need to orient yourself. Usually there are pictures, but this one doesn't have them.
And then the optic nerve is 4.3, the standard depth.
It's usually a little bit more shallow than that, but I just want to make sure we have everything in the image so we can kind of see it.
In the optic nerve, would you wear?
In the far field, you kind of see you guys are trying to turn on.
We went down. What's that? I won't load it again.
Sometimes you can see them.
I didn't know if you're seeing blood or like urine. How many different?
You have anything else, but if you don't, you're seeing blood work. So that's one of the limits. That's the same limit on. That's the same limit on everything now.
Okay.
You're just gonna see something.
You measure it.
Anything else you want to look at? I see that.
I'm not sure what they're covering on MSK, but
It's kind of hard. You're just like looking at what you're deciding with the pros that we have.
Interesting connective tissue things.
Where you like
Let's see.
Just what age you measure, what kind of
older men. And what really would be a big evidence for that? He's an older man who also smokes, right? So there's smoking of this old man why they actually offer the screening test.
Oftentimes inmates come in with like, oh, there's something in my eye. Either that's a workshop or whatever else. Somebody hit me with something.
Usually,
Something in my eye.
The sensitivity of facts is kind of debatable. People talk about it being more sensitive in the original papers than kind of subsequent studies have shown. But if you do a repeat PET scan, then there's actually, it increases the sensitivity quite a bit. They were doing them about 4 hours on average from the first one, so this is something that they're doing more as a presentation. But any patient that becomes unstable or change in their acuity and change in vital signs, that can tell you a lot of information. This is really not doing a lot of first time. That's why you get a wide range of support. How much blood you have at the time of your because for the surgical interns that we're doing one of these studies,
almost like self-diagnosis.
So theoretically, all of their positive aspects are probably in. That's not truly your first time shot.
3 is small aneurysm, and then above 5.
That's just kind of amazing.
That's what you want to grab as far as these measurements. So,
but if you do any website is public, if you go to OSU.ultrasound.com.
Really bad?
So I've heard they're preparing them.
That's a normal part to do is you can't get past
Yeah, sounds like a really good idea. That tells you so much right there, right? Because you got the diaphragm, you got the liver, you got the Morrison's pouch, everything right there. And that's when I'll switch my hand to the top of the probe. That way I can shoot down into the chest and make sure to increase your depth.
Oh my God.
I know that.
I'm used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show me, I just see.
So make sure make sure I get correct.
Didn't know this.
You had-
You're an expert.
That's good. Yeah, that's perfect.
I feel like
It's all cited.
so hard. It's hard to keep my eyes on. Well, I'm not doing
All right.
Your rescue, that would be, doing that, you just have a some people are like, in the belly, or like these big traumas that shut you down on their belly. You can put the probe on the
Yeah, so like if we're in the legs, that's kind of like this back. You just use a screen, like shit go through it and see color like pop up on the screen. And you say the best.
Look at probe. Can be nerve. That's again, you can do it for. All right, look at nerve.
So the heart, this looks like that's the one actually you want to make. Otherwise, you like pencil. Yeah, you want to put it down.
So this, you need to do median nerve block. You know the patient. Put the gel in.
One thing that I heard that.
So you want to right
what that positive vascular left of the water is going to look like. Yeah, so you can see if you were trying to get a view, like in the right upper quadrant.
Yeah,
So
you guys what also looks like
you'll get your view like this. Plain kidney diaphragm.
So what is it?
But I was just talking there, so look where your it will kind of layer out, but it can be up there.
I don't know.
Here's a picture I was talking about. Yeah, the cynicals. See how those seem vesicles. You can imagine if they were a little bit larger, this guy might fall in free fluid and get down his ladder. What a real positive basket. You see how those kind of just, it's almost like a sharper angle, whereas the seminal vesicles, see how they kind of
So big thing, a lot of schools trying to
blunt sharp corners. That's when you can get tipped off. It's actually
like looking for blood in brain.
Yeah, exactly.
they're trying to bring
I am, as always.
I tell you, man.
I'm like living the life for real. I'm like, I'm going to workshops now.
See what it's all about. There we go. So, let's say you had someone that had a big distended belly, had abdominal trauma, and you do a fast scan, if they're tachycardic, and they got prison on the belly, and you do a fast scan, it's negative. Why might that be? Another good way, I'll give you some more. Let's say they had hemoglobin, yes, like right before they got in the car, they left the hospital, had a hemoglobin, it was like 14, and now now, there's people that right after you.
I saw a little hint of it.
Yes. So ultrasound takes time to even when you know they have retrograde, I put some little ones. Surely there's got to be a way.
Otherwise, it's how bad.
It is awkward. It's one of those things you like. So I never touched
You see a lot of voice
There's like kids that like a year ahead of me, so so I didn't know if that was like rare.
Yeah, there's like there's 16 spots. You've got your diaphragm, you've got like everyone's more counts. Their aspiration sign is out.
Yeah, I feel like yeah.
That's another thing for you guys. My big challenge is was especially on this. What's your fluid? If you train ourselves to know is so what I should do is just about everything we're looking for is the only time but then I would get into like a little bit higher stuff here, but like a lot of times will help you more than if you're trying to get a better look. So I would say you're trying to get a better looking picture, decrease the gain and try and do the other tertiary.
Okay, you know, like from my growth in that.
Theoretically,
What did you press before you
so the most anterior is going to be the RD.
Yeah, so that's basically our limit right now.